Elena spent her grueling afternoons buried beneath mountainous restoration blueprints for the Pacific Northwest's grandest historic skyscrapers, quietly correcting catastrophic structural miscalculations, while her slick department director Julian coasted on her uncredited brilliance. When an emergency notification flashed indicating that their multi-million-dollar Ecolast contract was on the verge of collapsing due to a severe global material shortage, Julian merely smirked over his imported espresso and demanded she fix the disaster immediately without fracturing his golf schedule. Operating entirely in the shadows of the fluorescent-lit bullpen, Elena utilized decades of deeply cultivated industry connections, called in 3 high-stakes favors, and negotiated a complex international customs clearance during a frantic 10-minute call conducted entirely in fluent Japanese. By the following morning, the critical shipment was safely rerouted to the Seattle harbor. Yet Julian shamelessly stood before the executive board later that afternoon to boast that his aggressive negotiation tactics had single-handedly rescued the firm from financial ruin. The true backbone of their firm's flagship architectural project relied on a highly specialized sustainable thermal glaze manufactured exclusively by a reclusive generational artisan named Kenji Sato, based in a remote coastal village outside of Kyoto. When an urgent confidential letter arrived from Sato explaining that escalating global demands were forcing him to narrow his clientele to only those who attended his final intimate vendor summit in person, Elena immediately recognized that their entire pipeline was facing an existential threat. Hoping to secure the company's future, Elena presented a meticulous risk assessment report to Julian and requested a modest $1,500 travel stipend for a coach flight to Japan, explicitly detailing how this single component safeguarded over half of the firm's annual revenue. Julian casually tossed her hard work into the recycling bin with a condescending laugh, mockingly suggesting that he wasn't about to fund an expensive, self-indulgent Asian vacation for a mere back-office coordinator. Refusing to let his corporate blindness destroy her life's work, Elena used her hard-earned personal savings and remaining airline miles to book an exhausting multi-layover flight to Kyoto before spending her evening forming an independent corporate entity called Vanguard Materials LLC. She reached out directly to Kenji's daughter and apprentice, Naomi, with whom she had shared a deep bond ever since Elena had single-handedly guided her through a terrifying medical emergency during a chaotic Seattle trade show back in 2014. Stepping off the rattling regional train into the rain, moss-covered valleys of rural Japan, Elena felt the immense weight of her corporate invisibility dissolve as the crisp mountain air filled her lungs. She checked into a modest, traditional inn that smelled faintly of cedar wood and green tea, where a hand-delivered calligraphy note from Kenji Stowe himself already awaited her at the front desk, requesting her presence at a private dinner. Years ago, when the rest of the arrogant executive team had completely ignored Naomi Sato because she didn't speak fluent English, Elena had spent her own weekend translating technical blueprints, organizing local medical care, and ensuring she felt profoundly respected. That long-forgotten act of genuine human decency, buried beneath a decade of thankless corporate grind, was about to transform into the ultimate leverage against the empire that took her for granted. Over a quiet meal of grilled river trout and local sake, the legendary master artisan confessed that massive conglomerate firms from Berlin and Shanghai were aggressively courting his business with blank checks. Yet, he deeply mistrusted their hollow corporate promises. Looking directly into Elena's eyes with profound respect, Sato stated that he only wished to do business with people who valued honor and relationship over mere margins, asking if she would represent his legacy in North America personally. Though her hands trembled with a mixture of sheer terror and exhilarating liberation, Elena accepted his proposal, shaking his weathered hand to solidify a binding, exclusive distribution agreement that designated Vanguard Materials LLC as the sole gateway for his coveted thermal glaze. Returning to her modest inn under a canopy of stars, she realized she was no longer just an invisible cog in an ungrateful corporate machine, but rather the sole gatekeeper of the industry's most coveted material. When Elena returned to the bustling Seattle office after her secretly approved paid time off, she quietly resumed her duties without a single colleague noticing the profound shift in her demeanor or the jet lag hidden beneath her calm eyes. Meanwhile, Julian was frantically orchestrating the preparations for the highly anticipated annual Investors Summit, strutting through the glass corridors while bragging about the infallible stability of their global material pipeline. The grand presentation took place on the penthouse floor inside an opulent boardroom featuring panoramic views of the city skyline, where the region's top investors sat eager to analyze the company's projected quarterly growth. Clad in a simple, understated navy blazer, Elena took her familiar seat at the very back of the room near the refreshment table, watching silently as Julian began flipping through a flashy, over-designed slideshow filled with stolen data. Commanding the room with unearned confidence, Julian pointed his laser tracker at a brightly colored bar graph and boldly declared that their exclusive access to the sod-to-thermal glaze was legally locked in for the next 3 fiscal years. Elena merely took a slow sip of her lukewarm coffee, knowing that the deceptive data Julian was presenting had been completely plagiarized from the outdated spreadsheets she had compiled months prior. Right on cue, as if orchestrated by destiny itself, a private courier knocked firmly on the frosted glass doors and delivered a heavy wax-sealed legal portfolio addressed exclusively to the chief executive officer. The entire room fell into a stunned silence as the CEO opened the document, his affluent complexion turning completely pale as his eyes scanned the stark reality written upon the pages before him. The bewildered CEO quickly slid the documents down the long mahogany table to the general counsel, whose eyes widened in absolute disbelief as he realized their entire multi-million-dollar architectural project had just been completely compromised. The lawyer cleared his throat nervously, adjusted his spectacles, and scanned the crowded room until his sharp gaze locked directly onto the unassuming woman sitting quietly in the back row. Standing up with absolute poise and a spine made of steel, Elelenina walked calmly to the front of the boardroom while explaining that Kenji Sato had officially terminated his relationship with their firm due to repeated neglect and a total lack of communication. She explicitly informed the stunned assembly that all future shipments of the indispensable thermal glaze would now be handled exclusively by an independent intermediary entity, Vanguard Materials LLC. Who on earth owns this Vanguard company? Julian sputtered frantically, his voice cracking with a level of desperation he had never experienced before in his comfortable career. Elena looked him dead in the eye without a hint of malice, and calmly responded that she was the sole founder and principal consultant of Vanguard Materials, LLC, effectively shifting the entire power dynamic of the organization in a single breath. Placing 3 perfectly formatted documents directly in front of the paralyzed CEO, Elena formally submitted her resignation effective immediately alongside a completely restructured vendor agreement featuring tripled material costs and strict non-negotiable delivery terms. She coolly advised the board that they could either accept these new premium rates or watch their highly publicized architectural empire crumble into total irrelevance as their active project sites completely dried up. The general counsel grimly confirmed to the panicked board that the legal paperwork was completely airtight and fully validated by international trade registries, leaving them with absolutely no alternative routing options. Julian sank deeply into his expensive leather chair, his inflated ego visibly deflating as he realized his career was completely ruined because he refused to approve a simple travel request. Realizing that absolute ruin was the only alternative, the defeated CEO picked up his silver pen with a visibly trembling hand and slowly signed his name along the binding contract's bottom line. Clutching her signed portfolio, Elena delivered one final unforgettable glance toward her former manager, softly noting that since he believed the original journey was far too expensive, he could now enjoy experiencing what cheap management truly costs. Elena stepped out of the suffocating glass tower and embraced a brilliant future built entirely on her own terms, proving that the most valuable asset in any business will always be the dedication of the people who actually do the work. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for